Hello my friends and welcome back for another Simon Hurley Create video. This is Cassie. Today we're going to be using the Swirly Ferns background die. Super excited about this. It's brand new and I want to show you 4 different cards you can make using some different techniques with this background stamp. And it's beautiful. We do need some sentiments, so I'm going to bring in the brand new Posh Poinsettias. Love this set, but we're just going to be using the sentiments today, and then we're going to be using a couple of the sentiments from Doodle Florals because not all the cards I make today are going to be Christmas. This is a very versatile background stamp. So I took out all the guts of my Misti. This is just one way to ink up a background. If you've watched any of my background ones with Simon Hurley before, you've noticed that there are more than one way to do this. Or there is more than one way to do this. So I just put that inside my Misti, and I'm going to take some purple tape and I'm going to attach it to the back of this stark white Simon Hurley Create cardstock. I have that cut down to 4 1/4 by 5.5 inches, so it is the full front of an A2 size card. We're just going to make sure that stays put. And then I'm going to grab my magic powder bag and I am going to go over the whole front part of this card because I plan to do some embossing. So I'll grab some embossing ink and I will ink up this stamp, which is just a clear sticky ink. Any clear sticky ink would work, but this one's just a regular Brutus Monroe embossing ink. Versamark ink would work fine too. And then I will close the door of the Misti and try to get lots and lots of pressure on here. I'm going to emboss this in white. I know, embossing in white on white cardstock, but there is a method to the madness. All right, we'll pull that out, and then we are going to cover this with that Brutus Monroe Alabaster embossing powder. This is a fine detail embossing powder. So any fine detail embossing powder would work. You could probably get by with one that isn't fine detail, but I always prefer fine detail if I can find that. All right, and then we'll just keep covering this background. And then when that's completely covered, we're going to use our heat tool to heat this up and melt that powder until it is smooth and melted, completely melted. And you'll know because you'll be able to hold it up in the light and it'll go from a matte finish to a glossy, shiny finish. I won't bore you with the whole thing, but here it is. Doesn't look like much now. We're going to grab in some of that brand new ink. This is the fake plant and I love it. And we're going to ink blend this across almost the entire panel. We're going to go for an ombre look. So you'll notice it's obviously much darker at the bottom, and I am using hard pressure at the bottom, and I am like barely using pressure here when I get to the top. I don't want to go all the way to the top. So it's just very minimal pressure, but one of the cool things about this ink, which there are lots of cool things about this ink, is that you can layer it up. So you'll notice that I can make that green darker and darker. I mean, eventually you'll get it to that saturation point, but isn't that cool? And that it's beautiful as a light color, and it's super beautiful as a dark color too. And I love that this one is now in the Simon Hurley Create ink line. Love it. All right, so that's our background. That's it. Super simple. And you could do this with all kinds of colors. So I'm making this one a Christmas card, but you could make it a thank you card and use a different color if you wanted. I've got some black cardstock that I've pulled in, and I am going to ink up my sentiment just with some of that clear embossing ink again. And then I'll cover this again with white embossing powder, and then I will heat set that till that is smooth and melted. So I wanted that sentiment to really pop. And this one says, "'Tis the season. 'Tis the season to be jolly." That's what it says. All right, so our card base is going to be some more of that stark white cardstock by Simon Hurley Create. And I scored that at 4 1/4 inches. And then we do have to stamp on the inside. So I'm going to grab another sentiment from that same Posh Poinsettias set. And I'm going to ink that up with another of the new inks. This one's called Game Over, and it is like a burgundy, deep red, beautiful, beautiful color. So happy to have these darker, like regal colors in there to add to. I will now attach my card panel to my card base using some liquid glue. And then I'm going to use that same liquid glue to adhere down our sentiment. You could pop it up with some foam tape if you wanted, but because this is a Christmas card, I wanted to show you how quickly and easily you could probably mass produce these, really, because that panel didn't take hardly any time at all. And then I'll open that up and I'll trim off the excess. And then to embellish this quick and easy card, we got to add some of those pops of that red. So I have pulled in some Nuvo drops in the color Autumn Red. These matched perfectly, and I'm just going to be pretty generous with where I put them, just in kind of rule of threes there, putting them in, to make it look like berries on these ferns. And yeah, like I said, I was pretty liberal with how many that I put in there. And then when we're done with that, I will tap it down just a little bit to make those look a little bit more like enamel dots. And then that's going to finish off our first card with our emboss resist technique. So I love that. For technique number 2, we are going to be stamping some colored ink onto some craft cardstock. And let me show you what it looks like if you just stamp it straight on and if you stamp it over white. So we're going to be stamping it over white. I have another piece just inside my Misti, and I'm going to ink up my stamp with some white pigment ink. And then we'll just close the door of the Misti, grab a microfiber cloth just because it glides across there a little bit better. And then we'll pull it back and we have a really good impression. And I want to keep that panel there. I don't want to move it, so I'm just cleaning around it. This is kind of unnecessary now that I look at it and think about it. I didn't need to clean up around it, but I just couldn't help myself. So I'm cleaning around that with my microfiber cloth, and then I'm going to clean my stamp really, really well. I'll just use some cleaner that I have and then wipe that away with the microfiber cloth. Trying to make sure that my stamp is fairly dry for the next step. All right, and I'll heat set that, make sure the white is fairly dry as well. And now we'll ink up our stamp using another new color. This is called Midnight Snack, and it's a gorgeous navy blue. So happy that this color has been added to the line as well. I'm telling you, I just love these inks. And then we'll stamp that down, and you'll see just how it lightens it up a little bit, but this way you have some color on that craft cardstock, which is hard to get just by stamping your color right onto it. All right, I'll clean up my mess, and then I'm going to stamp my sentiment. So I've got a piece just of some more stark white cardstock. I'll put that in my mini Misti. Ink this up with some clear embossing ink once again. Stamp that down, and then we are going to cover that with some Gilded embossing powder. This is a fine detail gold embossing powder. For sentiments, I typically like to use something fine detail. Just works a little better most of the time, especially if it's a smaller sentiment. And the thank you would be fine, but it's the sentiment underneath that is pretty fine detail. So I will clean up my mess, otherwise you will see me dump that all over. And then I'm going to heat set my sentiment until that is smooth and melted. And then I do want to bring in some of that gold and put that on the background. I thought about Nuvo drops again, but I thought let's try something different. So I'm using some Gilded Aqua pigment, and I'm going to splatter it all over my background. This is basically a watercolor, but it's a nice sparkly, glittery, well, not glittery, but sparkly gold aqua pigment. And then I'm going to heat set that. Just want to make sure that's good and dry. And then we'll get ready to attach our sentiment. As you can tell, I did try to stamp it in blue, and I did not like the way that looked. It wasn't enough contrast. So we'll attach this down, trying to line it up on our glass mat and center it at the same time. And then when I'm happy with where that is, I'll push down, and then I'll trim off all of the excess. And then we'll bring in our card base, which is going to be some more of that craft cardstock, and I will attach this down to that card base using some more liquid glue. You could make a bunch of these super simple thank yous. I'm not going to stamp on the inside because it seems to me that when I have something to say as far as thank you, I've got lots to say. So I'm going to leave this plain on the inside, but I do notice that I have a little bit hanging off the bottom, so I'm going to trim that down with my guillotine trimmer so that everything lines up. And that's going to finish off our second card. So isn't that fun? We've stamped over some white pigment ink to make sure that we have that color popping through on some craft cardstock. For card number 3, we're going to do a fun technique using the ink and some water. So I'm going to ink up my background with some of that fake plant again. Make sure that I have a lot of ink on this background. I want it to be nice and covered. So I'm just covering. And then I'm going to take a spray bottle, and I'm actually going to spritz this with water about 4 times. Now, the paper that I have in there is the Stark White Cardstock by Hurley, and it works great for this. I wish I had actually spritzed it more. But you notice I'm closing the door differently. I'm actually bringing the paper to the stamp, just in case there was water droplets. That way it wouldn't drop on there, if that makes sense. And then take a look at this. It bled out, which I love. That's what I was going for. But I wish I had spritzed more because I really wish that I had more of that. But that's what I wanted to achieve. So we're going to go ahead and bring in some splatters as well. I thought about, using those same Autumn Red Nuvo drops, and you could, but instead I will take the other ink, which is the Game Over ink, and I'll put it on a stamp block. Just smush it right on there, and then I'll bring in a paintbrush and some water, and then I'll just flick that all over the background. So, give the illusion of berries, but, obviously not. So this is another super quick and easy Christmas card that you could be making. So my card base is some more stark white cardstock by Hurley Create, and this is the outside. I am just taking my ink pad and rubbing that on the one edge, just on the outside. I'll wipe up my mess, and then I will show you what I'm trying to achieve here in a second after I trim off about a 1/2 inch from my card panel. I wanted to bring in even more of that red. So this is what I was trying to achieve. So we'll have a little bit of that red peeking through and everything will tie together. For the inside of the card, we're going to stamp our sentiment using that same Game Over ink. And then I'm going to take that scrap that I cut off, and waste not, want not, right? I'm going to stamp my sentiment for the outside right on that. Typically I would use that on the inside somewhere, but I decided this time I was just going to stamp my sentiment on it because it fit perfectly. And then we'll get ready to assemble this card. Again, this was such a fast card to make. So if you're, like I said, anything like me and you're kind of last minute, this would be the kind of cards to make there at the end. So I'll glue that down with a little bit of liquid glue, and you could pop it up with foam tape, but I'm just going to use the liquid glue again. And then try to line that up on my glass mat. Make sure that that's down. And then we'll flip that over and trim off the excess. But that's going to do it for the third card. And super happy with how that turned out as well. So now I've got 2 Christmas cards and I have a thank you. I really do love just how quickly this one came together. All right, we're going to change it up a notch and we're going to make a slimline, and we're going to do with this background that is so cool that this one can do. We are peeling the pieces out, and we're going to use just those pieces. And we're going to stamp that all along the bottom of this card panel that I have. So I have this cut down to 3.5 inches by 8.5 inches. And yeah, just going to stamp those little ferns. Each of the pieces, I can't get over it. I just think it's so brilliant. We're going to stamp each of those pieces all across the bottom there in the fake plant color. And I love, so I'm watching this and I just love that Simon Hurley and Ranger were able to get the back, like when you stamp, clearly you can't normally see through a rubber stamp, obviously. And so they've got it printed on the front, so it's so much easier to see how you're stamping it. I love that. Now obviously it's still somewhat of a guessing game, but it's not that much. So I love that. Okay, so when I'm done stamping all of these little pieces, we'll just put them all back. I'll even grab one of the tiny little ferns. This little corner piece fits in there just perfectly. You'll notice I did stamp a little heavy on a couple spots, and so I do have, and I've put my finger in ink, and I get that on the panel. But I'm just using my mono sand eraser to get those spots up, and once you get started, it's not that bad. I'm not sure if you know this about Simon Hurley Create inks, but they are actually alcohol marker friendly. One more reason to absolutely love these inks. So it's fun that you can stamp in a color, which I did with the fake plant, and now I'm coming in with a couple of Copic colors. And I'm not coloring the entire leaf. I'm just putting down, I'm flicking the first color, which was G12 or G12, and then now I'm coming in with some G05, and then I'll blend that out again with the G12. But like I said, just one more reason to absolutely adore these inks is that they can do this now. So I love that. So I did that for all of the ferns, and now I'm going to come in with a little bit more of the fake plant. I didn't ink up my blender. I just used the ink that was on it, and I just kind of did it across the bottom. For my sentiment, I did grab out one of the sentiments from the Doodle Floral stamp because I didn't want this to be a Christmas card. I wanted this to be more of a thank you. So I'm going to ink that up with a black ink that I have, black dye ink, and then just a couple times, and then we'll be ready to get our card base ready to go. So I did trim down my card base. It actually folded out as 7 inches by 8.5 inches, scored at 3.5. And then I'll bring in some of that fake plant, and you'll notice that my blending brush is kind of giving some circular motions. in there, or, you know, you can see the circular motions in it. So I'm going to pull in a blender brush and soften that out. So that is why I like having both on hand. You can get you can get great saturation with a mini ink blending tool, but then you can soften things out with your blender brushes. So I like having both. All right, now we'll attach our card panel to our card base just using some of that Nuvo Deluxe liquid glue. And then to embellish this, because it clearly needs a little bit more color, I am going to pull in these this confetti mix. I don't actually think you can get this in the store where I got it from anymore, but it's just various colors of confetti, and I'll just stick that down with a little bit of that liquid glue and my crystal katana, and then that's going to finish off this card once I get all of those down. And I just went crazy on the color, and I thought that would be fun. It almost looks like a springtime card. So there you have it. There is card number 4. We ended up with 2 Christmas cards and 2 thank you cards. Very awesome. So let's go ahead and take a look at the cards that we did make today. And I would love to know which one was your favorite, or if you, out of all these techniques, if you had one that you liked the best, or if you've tried any of them. Go ahead and leave that down in the comment section. You know, heck, just say hi. I like hearing from y'all. I love interacting. So if you liked this video, please hit the like button, and please subscribe if you haven't already done so. And as always, I will see you very soon in another video. Bye, everybody.